So why don't we start with welcomes? So we're now February. I hope everyone's doing well. My name's Harvey Lowe. I've been voluntold to do the presidency of IPMS Toronto, but if anybody else wants it, they can have it. I've got with me on the group Robert Willardek and Eric there. You guys have been sending pictures to Eric. David is our host here. And of course, there's a couple other people on the call that are part of our group. But why don't we do this? Why don't we start with who's new? And you guys can feel free to chime in. Now, why don't we start with Esteban? You're new, so why don't we introduce you, and then whoever's new can go right after. Esteban, there you go. Off to you.
All right, I'm a little shy.
No worries.
Okay, my name is Esteban. So I've been modeling for over 20 years, since I was a kid. And I've been learning techniques and methods along the way. So I mostly build World War II aircraft. I actually started with that. I used to watch my older brother do it. So that's how I got into it. I was probably like 7 or 8 years old. I would sit on his bed and watch him hand paint everything. It looked disgusting, but to me, everything was perfect. Yeah. I've been doing that ever since. I first started doing it for my own. And then I saw other people just they turned it into a business. And I thought, hey, why don't I do the same thing, right? But I really wanted to improve my skills and the techniques, because at the time it wasn't to the standard of what people wanted. So I started practicing a lot. I started watching a lot of videos on how to do this, how to do that. Like, for example, getting rid of seams, right, fuselages and stuff like that, dry brushing, the whole package. So once I mastered it, I turned it into a business. I built for people as well. I just started building as well battleships. I got into that as well. Sci-fi stuff. I just finished watching, like I mentioned to Harvey, his video on the Falcon, the Bandai. That was amazing.
Thanks.
There's something there that I actually didn't know about. And if you guys could fill me in too. Filtering.
Yep.
I've never done that before, and I never heard it. I even called a couple hobby shops and mentioned it, and they didn't know what it was either.
I tell you what, Esteban. After Anthony's done his gig, why don't we have a short discussion on filters?
So now that you mentioned, I actually brought one of my 109s that I'm working on for somebody.
All right.
And if you guys could probably give me a little guidance on probably what color I should use. And you did mention on your video that it should be on the flat finish.
Yeah, filters on a flat finish. Yeah.
On a flat finish,
yeah,
right?
Yeah.
So if you give me your permission, I could show what I'm working on right now.
Well, why don't we do this? We're going to do show and tell. We've got a lot, actually. So
okay.
Hold that thought, Esteban. We're going to do, you'll be first off the bat then, once Anthony's finished on the show and tell, and we'll do it that way. If that's okay.
Okay.
So yeah, welcome, Esteban. Anybody else new? Who else?
I'm new.
Oh, okay. Introduce yourself.
I'm John. I built 172nd Airfix kit.
Turn your camera on, you little.
The camera doesn't work.
The camera doesn't. Oh, I'm just John Wong. I don't have a camera. John, welcome.
I'm having dinner. You'll see me after.
Okay, good stuff. Good stuff, John. I see Grant's on. Thanks, Grant, for joining us. Grant is our former treasurer for many years prior to David. So welcome, Grant.
Hey, Grant. Hey, Grant.
All right. Okay, so I guess without further ado, Anthony Chow, why don't you introduce yourself and say a little bit about what you're going to glowingly show everybody on this call.
Okay. I will need the share screen function enabled from the host, but do that.
I'll just give you the hosting duties there, Anthony. You can host, and then I can pull it back when you're done.
Oh, okay, sure. Yeah. So basically, hello all. Hi Gates.
Hi, everybody.
My name's Anthony. I basically run a 3D print on demand service, and yeah, like I guess for all of you guys, I mean, this is what you do for fun, like or at least for business or whatnot. So in many ways, what I do kind of is I'm a glorified photocopy service. It just happens that I can photocopy anything that's on the internet. Or anything that people model, et cetera, et cetera. So I can show you guys some of that stuff in the presentation. And
Where's your business, Anthony?
I'm an at-home business. Like my first full year of operation was actually 2019, and I had huge plans, miniatures ready, everything ready to go for 2020, and then nothing.
COVID.
So, it happens. Yeah. So yeah. So I guess if you would like, I could kind of get started on the presentation. It's probably better.
Go for it, Anthony.
Okay. So I don't know how many of you guys. I mean, everyone's seen 3D printing, and it's very, very enticing. It's very, very drool worthy. But a lot of people don't really actually see the whole picture. Most people really only see the figures, the miniatures, and whatnot. And when you see it, it's absolutely fantastic. It's one of those like, oh wow, the detail in that is absolutely unbelievable. There is a lot of lead up and ramp up to that point. And, I mean, I'll show just quickly a bit of that stuff. 3D printing is fantastic. It's a fantastic new technology. If you actually want something that no one else makes, you can literally, download a free modeling software, make it yourself, and then, literally print it, right? So the tech is out there. The software is out there. I mean, I'll be honest, like my dad has a hard enough time turning on the TV. So, like it's one of those technologies that it's not turnkey yet, but it's getting there. And if you're willing to put in kind of the hours and the energy for it.
Perfect.
So yeah, my company is called Token Resistance. And as I said, I'm a print on demand service. So it's one of those fun things where I do a lot of work, both commission work. So people will actually contact me and say, hey, can you print this for me? I get a lot of people doing Star Wars miniatures. I'll show you one later. And I get a lot of people doing all sorts of very, very strange, very cool stuff that, unfortunately, I got Spin Master throwing some jobs at me, which is cool. The downside with that is that I can't talk about it. NDAs. But very cool stuff. So I guess let me get started. So today I'm just going to cover very, very basic kind of overview stuff. So
By the way, Anthony,
yes.
Anthony, Jonathan Evans wants to know if you can do sex toys.
Thanks, man.
I'll be absolutely honest. I wouldn't recommend it. And I'll get into that later. But
giving you a serious answer to this too.
Yeah,
the edges are too sharp.
You will be surprised at the things people ask me to print. And so long as I'm within the legal boundaries, I have no problem doing it. But then there are other issues, like, for example, for males, having certain things that attach to parts that hang out is probably not a good idea, especially if there are burrs and other things that would make it very uncomfortable. I would highly recommend against it because once you start dealing with things like resin, you'll figure it out.
It was a joke. Let's move on.
Okay.
But there's a real answer.
There is a market though for modeling, and if and I'm actually being absolutely dead serious about this. Lorenzo entered the waiting room. Admit, right?
Yeah, admit. Yeah, admit.
Okay.
Yep.
Sorry about that.
That's all right.
But yeah, in all honesty though, yes, you can print the molds for sex toys, and you can actually produce them. I know this sounds kind of odd, where I'm taking a joke and being serious about it, but there literally is sky's the limit, being the options that you have for making 3D objects. So let me just like buzz on past the topics covered, but basically I'm going to cover like the two most common and most low cost-ish technologies that are available right now for everyone to kind of like dive into if you're so inclined. So, but a little about me. I've been doing this for like over 15 years. Printing stuff and making stuff look cool. I'm tool die maker. I do all sorts of fun stuff. So you know, I'll have kind of this entire presentation available for you guys to download later. I'll just pass it to Harvey, and he'll disseminate if anyone wants it.
Thanks, Anthony.
So okay, so basically, what 3D printing is taking a 3D object, cutting it up into layers, and then reassembling it somewhere else. And what you see in front of you is a model that I have. It's acquired from a company called Crossed Lances. So you start off with a basic model like this. You can download it, they're STL files, or you buy it. There are companies out there that actually sell their 3D models for personal use only. Because I am a 3D printer, if you have files that you want me to print, I can print it for you. But if I were to say, take someone's file without their permission and then reproduce it, I can get sued. So, you know, I mean, there are fun things about that. Anyway,
So Anthony, I got a quick question now that you mention it. And Vince, you may recall, Vince, you sent me a link to an Italian company that has, I think they do a 1/72nd Italian submarine. Do you remember that? But it's only the 3D plans. So that's what you mean, right, Anthony?
Okay.
Yep.
They send
Yeah.
that to you and you can print. But if you're doing a big object like 72nd sub, that's a lot of resin. So that would add in the cost, right?
yes, it
Yeah.
depends. It depends on what I'm printing, how big it is, and if the walls are thick. There are ways to get around that, and you know, I can talk about that later on.
Anthony,
Yes.
Anthony, so that's a really loaded statement where you say a 3D model is loaded into a, loaded, no pun intended, loaded into a slicer program. The 3D model, I don't know, are you going to talk about creating a 3D model is non-trivial. If you're doing it yourself, that's non-trivial. If you're buying one that's already been made, either to your spec or something that already exists. So that first part of that statement, a 3D model, that assumes that a 3D model has
Is
either been
available.
drawn, exists, what have you. I don't know if we're
Exactly.
going to talk about that. But
I will later on, more in the
Okay.
question and answer section, because there is, okay, so the default argument is that, you know, to model something in 3D and then have it created, the model can be created from any number of ways. One major way that people, you know, get 3D models is by 3D scanning objects, whether it's a face, a statue, a bust, whatever, a car. So actual real life data is digitized into a computer and then, you know, transferred over to create a 3D model. The second way to do it is to basically create it yourself using CAD/CAM software. So there's a lot of free CAD/CAM software out there that you can actually use just to test your test yourself and learn and be capable of. The third technique is to actually have someone else create it for you or find it somewhere else by someone else making it. Now, I have to keep that simple because that's a whole monster of a rabbit hole.
Yeah.
That you know, because if you actually are after a specific model, let's say someone wants a Heinkel or someone wants, you know, whatever, a tank, someone out there has probably modeled it. It's just a question of, can you get it? How much do they want to charge for it? Is it free? You know, or if something is not right in your eyes, can you make your own version of it? And the shortest answer to, you know, why I have simplified it to this point is because for most people getting involved in 3D printing, the first thing they do is they jump on places like Thingiverse or Cults, and they'll download a file for themselves to print. And these are usually free prints, you know, things like Benchy and whatnot, that are good for someone just learning, just starting off, just trying to figure out, you know, how am I supposed to, you know, print something cool. So that's why I'm trying to keep it as simple as I can and you know, go from there. So the actual process itself, you load a model. Wherever you get this model from, the process is the same. So you get the model, and then you slice it in a program. And what the program does is this. It turns it into layers. And the layers themselves are, again, what the computer can understand on a two-dimensional plane. So this two-dimensional plane usually gets in very tight like this, where the computer itself says, oh, okay, well, this plane looks like this, and then it uses G-code or it uses light to make that entire plane, and then move on to the next layer. So it's kind of like carving out a bust of Beethoven using a stack of paper. Very cool, but again, if you take one sheet of the stack, it's kind of like, okay, well, this doesn't look like much, but put together in a specific sequence, oh wow, I have Beethoven. So there's that. So generally speaking, all the technologies work the same way. There are a couple exceptions which are happening now, and the technology is moving forward. But again, like all the basic technology is the same. So here, what we have is what this printer is called the Ender 3. It's probably one of the lowest cost entry-level printers available. You can probably find one of these things for about $200-300 on even off Amazon. And what it prints is fairly reliable. However, you have to keep in mind that this technology, if you look on the left-hand side, you can see that I've got kind of typical layer heights. Most prints happen at about 0.2 millimeters thickness. So I don't know if anyone here is like absolute metric or absolute imperial. I can go either way. When you're working in this stuff, you kind of have to figure things out. But again, when you look at the thickness of a sheet of paper, the average sheet of paper is 100 microns thick. So that is kind of the most comfortable minimum standard size or standard height layer that you can get from a 3D printer like this. Now, that's fantastic for things that you will see at a distance. So again, you guys saw Gates's wonderful painting of the Freeman House. Most of the big walls and most of the large sections of the structure were printed using FDM. And the reason is because you don't really need to worry too much about detail. People are not seeing it from close enough to see those resolution lines per layer. So using FDM, you get results like this, where each layer, if you look at the the beholder, the eyeball on the right-hand side, you can see given that the orientation of the eyeball when it was printed, the layer lines help make this thing look a bit cooler, because the top of that, the eyeball looks like it's looking at somebody, and that is basically an artifact of how the eyeball is printed layer by layer. So again, if you look on the other side, other than the crowning and the shutters, that part of the house of the Freeman House was all printed using FDM. And that technology, again, you can see the layer lines. It's hard if you look really, really close. You can see the layer lines, but given that you're seeing this thing from a distance, those layer lines kind of blend away, and you try to hide the layer lines as well as you can, so that they're not blatantly obvious when you're looking at a model or an object. So,
Anthony,
yes.
just so before we go on to resin printing, just so it's clear to everybody, when your wife or you get a bag with frosting and you do this sort of thing.
So basically the way
it's essentially the same thing with molten plastic. It's computer numerically controlled. The slicer takes horizontal cross sections. And then each horizontal cross section is essentially extruded.
A layer of frosting.
The plastic comes out, it's a layer of frosting. And then if you go back to the picture of the Ender 3, so you see where that stag
in with the TV guide.
What's that? Anyway, Anthony, you may want to explain a little bit about the bed, the motors, just so people get a better sense of physically what's happening.
So normally, physically what happens when you're 3D printing an object is that you need to create a layer. It doesn't matter how that layer is created, just so long as you create a layer so you can stack the next layer on top. So again, as your explanation using frosting, I usually use toothpaste, but or hot glue. Yeah. But essentially, it's the same. So what you can do is essentially using this, the bed that you see that holds that reindeer. is usually heated to a temperature that is close to the melting point, close to the glass transition temperature of the plastic. That just means that it gets sticky. So when the hot plastic comes out, it likes to stick to something. Well, once that platform is heated to that temperature and the plastic starts flowing out of that nozzle, you can see that little cube-like object that's in the middle of the gantry. That object is what houses the hot end, and the hot end is what allows you to draw. Now, the hot end is very, very small. The nozzle is about 0.4 millimeters in diameter. So you have good, nice little layers that you can draw using that, one thing at a time. So what you do is essentially, if you look closely here, you can see that these are all lines, individual lines. So that head is told to draw each line according to this plan. So in the end result, you have layers being stacked on top of each other, one line at a time being drawn by this machine. And it all uses CNC G code, and it all basically, this technology has been around for a while. It's just only recently has it become economically feasible for modelers and people, to do this at home. I will say first, this machine basically is the technical term for this machine is it's a 3-axis coordinate positioning system. In English, it just means that it moves that head left and right, up and down, and the bed moves back and forth, so that you can move that little hot nozzle at the very end anywhere on that platform within a 3-dimensional cube. That allows you to draw things one thing at a time, one layer at a time, and allow it to cool. So I can show you something kind of neat later on, but effectively, yes, you're drawing it one layer at a time, from the usually outside to in or inside to out, so that you create that one sheet of paper of Beethoven's bust. And then you do the next sheet of Beethoven's bust on top of that previous sheet, and you keep building on top of itself. So that's, hopefully that has helped.
Anthony,
kind of
Kevin White, I was wondering if I could ask you a quick question.
Yep.
I wonder if or is there clear plastic you could use to print airplane canopies with?
Okay, so I've actually tried some of this. The answer is yes and no. I've tried to make canopies. I've tried to make quite a few things. The problem with trying to print using FDM for objects that are supposed to be transparent is that the material by definition is porous. So as you're drawing lines next to each other, it's very hard to get them to completely cover all the air gap between different layers and different lines. So the end result is that you end up with basically something that is, the plastic itself is transparent, or at least translucent. And then the problem is that once everything's printed together, you have air gaps that cause light to diffuse and prevent that kind of light from going through clearly. Now, that said, it is possible to make something transparent, or at least less than opaque and whatnot. And the way to do that is to actually cover it and coat it with a plastic resin, a clear plastic resin, so that you get rid of all those air gaps. So that because, as I said, this thing prints with ridges, right? This prints with layers, and each layer between them have a little ridge that will diffuse light. So if you, again, coat and cover it so that it's smooth, or sand it down smoothly and then coat with epoxy, with a clear coat, you can get semi-transparent, but it will never be truly transparent.
Great, thank you.
Anthony,
Okay, yes.
Anthony, I know you're going to talk about resin printing. So
Yep.
to take Kevin's question, can you do optically clear in resin?
Yes.
Okay, so Kevin, that's part of the answer if you go to resin.
Okay.
The other answer, Kevin, I think is vac form if you were to vac form your canopy, you're probably much further ahead if you use something like a Vivac or the packaging the plastic that's used for doing clear blister packs.
Yep.
Lexan,
got-
polycarbonate, Lexan, polycarbonate, PETG, they're fantastic vacuum form materials. And they will always look better
Yeah.
because you can get them very ludicrously thin and you don't have to worry about light curing. One of the problems with curing resins is that they will yellow over time because that's kind of how the monomers, reattach themselves. So again, you will never get a better canopy, at least not presently with the technology available, than by vacuum forming it.
Great, thank you.
Wow. Good point.
Okay. Yeah, I spent a few years doing vacuum forming, so it,
Yeah, I've done a fair bit.
oh, it's so fun. Okay, so all right, so let me kind of move on quickly. The next kind of technology that's kind of become common and low cost enough that people can consider it as, hey, let's do this because you've got a couple $100 kicking around. DLP is one version of resin printing. There are about 5 or 6 other different forms of resin printing or technologies, but they all use the same resin and they all basically use the same idea. What you're doing is, whereas before we're using one hot end to draw, like using like using a toothpaste or a hot glue gun. In this case, we're not doing that. In this case, what you're doing is you're creating a very, very thin layer of liquid resin and then turning on a light to harden that resin in that shape. Then you lift that resin up so that, that hardened resin up so that liquid resin flows underneath, and then you do it all over again. Now, that kind of idea, it's simple, it works fantastically, and the only reason why it's possible today is because of the level of the demand that we've had for monitors and screens and computer tablets and whatnot. These tablet screens are fantastic because the LCD in them is very, very, very high resolution. So you can get literally 4K resolution on on a panel that's maybe 5.5 inches across. So this allows very, very high resolution by using light to pass through that LCD so that you can harden the plastic. So let me show you the next slide here. Oh, sorry. Let me finish up here. The typical layer heights, if you look at what I've got on the left-hand side, and most of you have probably already read it by now, but the typical layer heights people print at are usually around 0.03 millimeters. That's 30 micron. At 30 micron, again, a sheet of paper is 100 microns. So you're already at 1/3 the thickness of a sheet of paper for a layer, which means that the light in the terms in the looking at like canopies or any type of imperfection due to layering is much, much less noticeable on this than it would be using the FDM technology that I just talked about. My typical standard resolutions are either 20 micron or 50 micron, and neither of those are easily visible to the human eye. So, unless of course you're wearing a loop and you're kind of going a little crazier for trying to figure out details. So you can do this. The Boba Fett on the left is printed at 50 microns, and the little tank on the right is also at about 50 microns. The tank on the right is 1/100 scale. And Boba Fett, obviously, he is what would be about 28 millimeter scale, or 156? 157, thank you. So you can see the level of detail on these. I'll be honest, I couldn't see a lot of the detail because I'm half blind. I need, like a loop. But you can see what is possible in these cases.
Sorry, I got a question, Anthony.
Yep.
So that's amazing detail.
Mm-hmm.
If you can you add more detail to that?
Yes.
If you could.
The thing about 3D modeling is that once you have a model, the software exists for you to augment, modify, or adjust that model as you see fit. So there's a lot of software out there. Some of it a lot of it you have to pay for, but there's some free things out there that you can basically, if you can get your hands on the STL file or the model, you can basically take that and then start tweaking it. So some people have put Yoda's head on like what's called a Warhammer 40K Space Marine, right? Like kit bashing and being able to manipulate and do whatever you want now is a lot easier and harder, but you have that option available. So the model doesn't care what scale it's at. The 3D model only cares that it is it's watertight, as the term goes, so that there are no holes in it. So there's software that you can take that, and then you can start adding details. So if you wanted to add a dent to Boba Fett's helmet on the left, you can. They're deforming tools that you can use in software packages that will allow you to do that. So yes, if something you get is not to your satisfaction, there's no reason why you cannot modify an STL file, like modify the digital model of it.
And it's something like something like that. How much can it cost?
For which, the software or
for
the
the Boba Fett?
Oh, the model?
Yeah, the Boba Fett.
The model, this model was actually a commission job. So if you look online, there are artists out there that will work commission jobs, or they sell their 3D models online. So I don't know the cost for it, because this, as I said, I was asked to print this for somebody, and so.
Oh, okay.
Okay, but all you have to do is look for Boba Fett. The gentleman involved, I think he's in the UK, but yeah, the level of detail work he does is unbelievable. I just
Anthony,
yes.
Anthony, what was the for perspective, what was the layer height that you used on the Boba Fett, and what was the print time?
The Boba Fett print time was approximate. Okay, so that's kind of a loaded question in multiple ways. So one of the machines I have is a high-speed, high-resolution printer, and it's available on the market for probably about $400.
It has a monochrome screen, right?
Yes, it has a monochrome screen, and it's
Yeah.
high-speed printer.
I guess what I'm trying to get to, Anthony, here is that it's imperative that people understand that layer height and print time are
very
directly
closely
proportional.
related. So, okay, so kind of a bit of the mechanics behind the resin DLP printing is that resin requires a certain amount of energy before it hardens. And the two technologies right now that are being used to harden that resin using DLP, one is, they call it monochrome. Think of the old black and white screens that you had. It's the same idea. But the advantage to that screen is that it lets more light through. Whereas you have the older technology, which basically used just the typical screen literally from your cell phone. They yanked out 5.5-inch screens because there's a huge surplus of it. No one wanted 5.5-inch screens anymore. Everyone wanted the 6.5-inch screens. So with this glut of surplus screens all around, someone figured out, hey, you know what? Let's use this. To harden, to allow light through to harden plastic. The good thing about that was that it was cheap. The bad thing is that it's not efficient in letting light through. So that's why you have, for example, two kind of advertising bits. Now, in terms of hardening plastic, the monochrome screens will always be faster because they let more light through. They don't have to go through 3 layers, as opposed to the the classic color screens, which you have the red layer, green layer, and blue layer. So, as I said, okay, with that, knowing that, to print a model like this, the Boba Fett took about 4.25 hours using a 4K screen, 4K mono screen. If I were to print that using a traditional method, 4K mono screen at 50 micron layer height. If I were to use a the older machines that I have to print it, it would take approximately 6 to 7 hours to do the same thing. So the time savings is relative. You know, a lot of times you'll just set it, let it run, walk away. The layer height, if you look closely at the Boba Fett, you can just see the layer height. Just. And even that's kind of a hint more than you really see it. If you look on his left leg, on his boot, near the front, you can just see faint lines where each layer hardened. But again, most people don't carry loops around and they don't look that closely. As I said, layer height will give you a lot of the lower the layer height, the higher the resolution vertically. The good thing about that is that you get crazy detail vertically. The downside to that is that it takes a freaking long time. Every time the computer in the resin printer prints a layer, it says, okay, now you have to lift the build platform and put it back down again to do the same thing. So you're using more layers, so it has to take more time. You know, the actual amount of time that you're using for the light to harden the plastic, for a layer, using 20 microns, it takes approximately 7 to 9 seconds using a color screen. Using a monochrome screen, it takes approximately 2 to 2.2 seconds. So you do save time there, but that's not where the majority of time is coming from. The majority of time is it takes about 10 seconds for the build plate to go up and come back down again. Whether you're using the mono screen or the color screen is irrelevant. The major difference you'll see only at about 50 micron to 100 micron print heights.
Anthony,
Which, yes.
go back to the DLP photo.
Okay.
So I think it would help the guys to understand, you know, the vat, where the resin goes, the build plate,
Yep.
the fact that a resin printer only has 1 degree of freedom versus having to control 3 degrees. So maybe a little
Yep.
explanation there.
Sure. So in front of you, I've put 2 pictures there. The machine on the left is called the Anycubic Photon. It's one of the first readily available, low-cost DLP machines. The one on the right is called the Frozen Sonic Mini 4K. That one is perhaps one of the latest machines that Frozen has released. That one was released less than 4 months ago. So if you look at them, they're very similar. You have a vat at the bottom. You have essentially a track that and a lead screw that allows your build plate to go up and down, and you have your build plate at the top. This all uses the same idea. What it is you're basically filling that vat with a little bit of resin, and then you're lowering your build plate down so that it makes contact with the light projector underneath it. Raises it up a little, the light projector turns on, hardens the plastic, and then that arm over there raises the platform up far enough that it peels off of a plastic sheet of basically Teflon on the bottom of that vat. The great thing about that is that nothing really likes to stick to Teflon. I will recommend Rain-X though, to help things stick less to the Teflon. But again, using the technology, the build plate itself is typically made of aluminum, and it's been roughed up to a certain degree, anodized or bead blasted. So the resin, when it hardens, likes to stick to that a lot more than it likes to stick to the Teflon sheet underneath. Every layer is produced in whole, in one shot. So again, for the Sonic Mini 4K, the moment the build plate goes down and then touches the light surface, it raises up just enough from its last point of plastic curing, and then the light hits it again. So now you have a new layer that's been hardened. So the build plate raises up again, so that it peels off the Teflon sheet, and then comes back down again with a little bit of gap. And so it repeats this process over and over again, so that basically, again, going back to the Beethoven's bust made out of sheets of paper, it's basically creating each sheet at one shot at one time. This is as opposed to the previous technology, which again, you had to draw that whole thing using, a tube of toothpaste. Right? It takes a lot longer to do that than it does to do this. So the frozen Sonic Mini on the right takes 2.2 seconds ish to harden the resins that I use. And that's assuming that the resin is at 50 micron thickness. On the
So-
left,
Yeah. I was going to say that, sorry for interrupting, but just so it's clear, what Anthony was talking about, slide 1, the workflow is the same. A 3D model is created, purchased, stolen, whatever. You have a 3D model. You run it through a slicer. And what's the interesting thing about the slicer is that the slicer will generate control code. And Anthony's alluded to it, calling it G code. G code is ancient stuff, and some people will know about it, whatever. The G code will be different for an FDM printer because you have an XY head that's moving, and then the Z axis, it's going up and down, whatever. And the G code for a resin printer. So workflow is the same. So Anthony's workflow, or the workflow, is 3D model exists or is created. Once you're happy with it, you run it through the slicer, and the slicer will create, you have to have a slicer, and if I'm not mistaken, Anthony, I might be wrong, you redirect the output of that slicer depending on the machine that you're going to have. Is that correct?
correct. So there are two paths that it can go. One path will create a single image. And that single image is what allows the resin printers to work from. Whereas the other pathway creates a pattern that that print head has to follow to create the entire platform.
And the interesting thing is that whereas that reindeer grows from the hoofs up to its antlers, in the resin printer, it would be printed with
Upside
the
down.
hoofs at clicking the build plate, and it would grow out of the vat, kind of sci-fi-ish, I guess. And the horns of the reindeer are the last things printed, but they're printed upside down, which is kind of cool.
Not always, but yes.
Yeah.
It depends on orientation. So the resin printers, the DLP printers, the computer doesn't care whether it's standing on its head or standing upright. And the whole reason is because the whole process is all dependent upon building the previous layer vertically. Whether you do it using the FDM technology, where you're drawing it line by line using again, the hot glue gun, or here where you're creating one picture layer at a time, it's the same process. It's just the only difference is, does it have to go through an intermediate step of, drawing line by line, or just do the whole thing in one shot? So, okay. So, okay.
All right, let's keep it moving.
Yep. So this is what you can do with DLP. This is for scale. This gorilla skull was actually scanned from an original gorilla skull, a big R skull. The skull measured probably 12 to 17 inches. And basically I had to scan the whole thing. And then once I had it scanned, I converted it into a computer model and then reproduced it here. This one, I think the skull is approximately 1 inch long, so 25.4 millimeters. But you can see that this guy probably needs some dental work. So I like showing this one because it shows you just the level of detail you can get just from, again, you're dependent upon your original data. So the more detailed your original data is, the better your output result. So these shoes and this bust are another bit of fun. The shoes that are blue are 1/48 scale, and they're sitting on a dime. The tiny shoes are at 1/96 scale. So, yeah. Unfortunately, my camera had a hard time trying to focus in on the shoes, and it kept focusing onto the dime. But again, you can see the level of detail level you can get out of these printers. I lost about 24 of those things down the drain when I was washing these things.
Anthony,
Yes.
just so it's clear, if you take the 48 scale shoes, you've got this blobby thing at the bottom. That's the part that sticks to the
Build plate.
plate. And those are supports, guys. So essentially, as the plate is coming up, it creates these little supports. And then the shoes actually get modeled, and you have to get in there with your nippers, and you have to spend a bit of time cleaning that up by getting rid of those supports, correct?
Yep. It's not as hard as it sounds. The reality is that you can get those supports off fairly quickly using hot water. The thermal expansion on those little things and the water absorption allows that to be a lot more fragile. So you can basically, once you run it under hot water for a few seconds, you can actually the things will just peel off. So, but
wouldn't that also do something to the surface? And if you have tiny detail, wouldn't that also damage the detail?
Generally, no. The resin itself is cured. Generally, when you're washing the parts, you're just getting rid of all the extraneous resin that's been coating the whole thing. So you don't actually lose any detail because the detail is stable. The plastic has cured, and so the plastic itself isn't really going to change very much, unless of course you're brushing it with like steel wool or something. I mean, this is still plastic.
Impressive.
Because actually, sorry, because I know that there is a technology with much more expensive printers where you can have two different plastics, and one of the supports can be melted away.
Yep.
With specific chemical or whatever.
Yes. Unfortunately, that's only for FDM.
Yep.
They don't have that technology available for resin because when you start mixing resin together, different resins will react differently, and so you're kind of stuck with a single type of material when you're using resin printing. So,
good to know. Thanks.
You can buy dual-headed 3D printers, commercial grade, not like the industrial grade, and those will probably rack you up about $600 or $700. But I'll be absolutely honest with you. I have 4 of them. I don't use them. Like I don't use them to print multiple materials at the same time. You'll find that for the most part, being able to print multiple materials is a nice idea, but in practice, it's usually just easier to use one material and clean up after it.
Are those flash forges?
I've got flash forges and a couple others, but again, yeah.
Okay. A buddy of mine has a flash forge dual head.
Yep, it's a nice machine.
Oh yeah.
Caveat being that, I mean, as I said, I originally got them thinking that I would do a lot more multicolored, multi-material printing, but the reality was that it was just easier, cheaper, and simpler to keep it with just a mono material. Okay. So here is when things go horribly wrong. So the picture to the left is what I like to refer to as angry spaghetti. And the picture to the right is usually what happens when a print build just doesn't work right. Failure rates when you're printing are not something that a lot of people advertise. Industrial companies will not release failure rate because, I mean, that's a business model issue. I can tell you that generally speaking, for every hour that a print job runs, you have a 1% increase in chance of failure. And your base chance of failure generally starts around 10%. Now, this is kind of an off-the-cuff thing. Failure rates for most print jobs if you do your homework and if you set up things properly, about 1 in 10 job will fail, roughly, if you are paying attention and doing your work. Otherwise, if you don't kind of do what is necessary, for example, put some type of adhesive on your print bed or whatnot, it will fail a lot more consistently than it will actually print properly. So as I said, the longer you have a print job running, the higher the probability of failure. Because things just happen. You lose power, something, random acts of Bob, random acts of cat, and random acts of dog tend to make these things questionable in their repeatability. But if you can control for that, it's generally not so bad. One of the horrible things is that when you're dealing with FDM printers, you've got a hot end, and that hot end is very hot. It typically runs anywhere from 170 degrees Celsius up to 260 for the normal plastics, and then up to 400 plus for some of the high performance plastics. So that is a fire hazard if you allow anything to catch, and if something goes terribly wrong. Anecdotally, I had one incident where my filament spool got stuck, and so it was mounted separately from the machine. It wasn't actually on the machine. So my machine picked itself up, dragging itself up the filament line, and almost like basically pulled itself off the shelf. So that's something that you probably want to control for if you have a chance to. So
How about the fumes, Anthony? Are they very corrosive?
I'll get into that in a second. So
and actually, you're showing the FD. Would the resin printers also have that much failure rate, or have a similar failure rate?
Resin printers are different. Their failure rates are more dependent upon people not knowing what the resin, the character of the resin is, and to be not supporting their models properly. So they don't really mechanically fail the same way. They will fail. Electronics will burn out, motors will go do bad things, that kind of thing. But their failure rates are different. They're not quite the same as FDM, and I'll get into that in a bit. So yeah, this is most of you have probably read this by now, but this is kind of the general issues for the hidden costs and risks, like things that people don't really talk about. It's like when you buy a car, no one tells you that, okay, well, how much insurance is going to cost. There's, oil changes, tire changes, weird things that can happen. There's a weird noise coming out from the side of your car. All these things happen, and a lot of people don't really talk about it. But but they love showing you the end result. Just don't like talking about the back end. Typically, for most machines, a new machine requires anywhere from about a week, like a work week of time, to get up and running, dialed in to where you want it to be. If you're a new user, expect to add 100 hours to that time because you need to figure out what you're doing. The good thing is that the community is growing. It's a massive community online. And so they're willing to help a lot of new people. But again, there are other risks, not time related. Time, I mean, a lot of people get frustrated after about 20 hours. They've tried printing up 10 things and all of them look terrible. And it's because their machines are not tuned properly, or like the whole problem is that you have so many different options and materials and whatnot that it's hard to keep track of, okay, well, what works well for one thing and what works well for another. So what two machines coming off the assembly line side by side will not have the exact same characteristics. Mechanically, they can be almost identical. Software-wise, it's the electronics, like for example, heating elements and whatnot, that can vary, and that variation usually causes a lot of grief for an end user who's not ready for that type of investment in time. So I'll just, I'm assuming you guys have looked over most of this stuff. And, I can kind of go to the FDM side. So Cost of printing. So plastic is moderately expensive, and it's getting more expensive right now, probably because so many people are stuck at home. A typical kilogram of plastic in PLA, which is polylactic acid, it's perhaps the most common printing plastic today. And it's a corn-based plastic, which is fantastic. And it is very, very user-friendly. The only downside is that there's a bit of shrinkage and it'll crack over time. But most people who are printing things in PLA really don't expect it to last more than 10 or 15 years. In terms of the actual cost of running a machine cost is about 200 watts per hour, and a typical print job will take anywhere from 4 to 10 hours, maybe 20 hours. Or if you're printing something honking big, you can adjust your time accordingly. So depending on how much you pay for electricity, this really isn't that expensive unless you're doing a lot of printing, which you're talking about kilowatt hours in weeks, well, in days. So something that people also don't tell you about is maintenance. Because these machines are being mass produced and basically thrown out as fast as they can be made, there tends to be some dodginess to the electrical hot ends and consumable items. So your hot ends and your fans, I mean, they're all things that move and they burn out eventually. So you'll have to kind of factor that into maintenance and repair. So, okay. Risks, fire hazard. People don't realize that these things can set fire to your house, and the reason is because if the sensor that detects the temperature doesn't work properly, and your little heater package keeps heating up, you can exceed 400 or 500 degrees Celsius just at the head. So if you're going to buy a machine, I highly recommend you just make sure that it has thermal runaway protection. Most have them, but some don't. So another thing about air quality. When you're printing with FDM, it creates what's called VOCs, so little tiny particles of plastic that float around in the air. This stuff is not good for you. Highly recommend get some air filtration systems, something to at least keep the VOCs in check. Okay. Anything anyone wants to ask about, or if that's good, I'll move on.
Okay, great. Thanks, Anthony. You have any other questions for Anthony, or are you still? Oh, you're still moving.
Yeah, I still got a bit more.
Okay.
So cost of resin is about $70 per liter. That's $70 per kilo. The good news is that most of the things you want to print generally with resin are very, very small and high detail. But the bad news is that it's expensive. So keep that in mind if you're going to go into resin printing. Second thing is that you'll need things like personal protective equipment, IPA, to clean the models. You need gloves, masks, all sorts of crazy stuff. This stuff, I cannot stress enough that resin printing is actually dangerous. You need to make sure that if you're going to resin print, you have some way of venting all your fumes outside. Because if you're doing this in a basement where there's no air, no ventilation, the resin and the fumes from the resin are irritants, so they can basically. I've seen these things blister people. You'll have hard time breathing because your body's saying, "Oh, this is not right." So, as I said, keep that in mind. You'll need PPE. The risks, as I said before, resins can be extreme irritants and blistering agents. I saw a guy dip his hand into resin, and a couple hours later, I mean, he was starting to blister. Like, this is not a joke. The newer resins are safer than the ones that we were using 10 years ago, but they're not that much safer. So keep that in mind if you're going to do this. I know I'm kind of trying. I'm somewhat scaring some people, but please be advised that if you're going to do this, you can get fantastic results. Just make sure you keep yourself safe. So, and for CAD and modeling software, there's a lot of stuff online for free, which is a great price really when you think about it. So if you actually take a look, there's FreeCAD, TinkerCAD, Fusion 360, Mesh Mixer. If you're into sculpting, you actually like sculpting, there's a program that was discontinued a while ago, but it's still made available for people. It's called Sculptress, and I've seen people make heads and busts and monsters and all sorts of crazy stuff using Sculptress, and the work is fantastic. So if you want 3D modeling and you want to test the waters, you don't really want to pay money for an expensive CAD modeling package. These things are available for you. Highly recommend trying them because, and especially Fusion 360, like AutoCAD has come a long way. And whereas before they were getting their butts kicked by companies like SolidWorks and whatnot, now Fusion 360 is changing the way the game is played because it's accessible to people. It's easier to use, much more user friendly, and there are like free tutorials online everywhere. So that's something to keep in mind. Free is good. So model sources. If you're actually into this, you're going to go for it. You can get good stuff. Generally from these places. Thingiverse is mostly free. They've recently not been too good because they've been wielding the ban hammer a bit heavy. But you have Cults 3D, which has both free and paid stuff. My Mini Factory for paid stuff, CG Trader. You can always go to these websites and take a look at the models that people are making. Because something that I love explaining to people is that when you're talking about an STL file, if it's a very, very highly detailed file, it doesn't matter how big you print it. That detail will stay there. So if you have a very low detail object, it doesn't matter how big you print it, the detail will be very low. But if you have a very high detailed object, it's always bragging rights. Who can get the most detail out of the smallest item possible? And that's it. I thought I'd show you a bit of the house before. Gates did his wonderful job on it. This looks a little different. And it's before the paint. And I kind of like this. It worked out well.
Yeah, it looks great.
So
I delivered it to the museum a couple of weeks ago, and the people were extremely happy.
Oh, I'm sure.
Anthony, did you?
It exceeded their expectations.
Who did the modeling?
I did.
And
I
what
did
you
all
use?
of it.
Fusion?
Nope, SolidWorks.
Ah,
Nice.
I could do it in
SolidWorks-
Fusion, but I'm just not as familiar with Fusion right now. I'm practicing, but
you don't mind my asking. SolidWorks is not cheap.
yep, I paid a full friggin' $6.5 for it. It hurt me.
Yeah.
But
Wow.
it was worth it because I'd spent literally 16 years using that program.
Yeah.
So, okay, I think it was like 14 years, but close enough. It's not a cheap program.
But
and
you're in
it is-
business as well, right? So
Yes.
for you, this is a business expense because,
Right off.
right, there
Yep.
is a way to get SolidWorks for $40. And the way
if
you
you're a
do
student.
it, you join the Experimental Aircraft Association, which is in Wisconsin. And they've got a deal where if you become an EAA member, you get SolidWorks for the price of the membership to the EAA. However, there are some caveats. It's a student version. You shouldn't be using it for, like, you couldn't qualify, but
No.
a hobbyist could. And by the way, Fusion 360 is free.
Ish.
Ish, because they've changed some of the rules around. But the modeling is exceptional. Can we go back to the 3D model again real quick? It's
nice.
stunning.
All right, I'm cognizant of time, guys. So
Okay.
we're about 8:45 right now. Why don't we?
I
go
am
ahead
so
and-
sorry. I
No,
tried.
it's okay.
I tried.
All right.
No, it was
So we're
awesome.
but thank
Awesome.
you. We'll post it on the web. Thank you, Anthony. And why don't we just go right into show and tell? And we'll start with Esteban, and we'll save the conversation for filters later, just so we can get through the show and tell.
Yep.
All right. Over to you, Eric.
Okay. Let me just.
Thank you, Anthony.
No
Good job,
worries.
Anthony. Good job.
Excellent.
Good
Yeah,
job.
awesome, man. Thanks.
On right now.
Oh, nice.
So I took it as Anthony was talking. So yeah, decals are applied. There's a gloss coat over it.
What kit is that, Esteban?
This
What
is
scale?
the Tamiya G6.
72nd, 48th?
48 scale.
48,
Yeah,
okay.
it's an amazing kit. The fitting is almost perfect. They engineered it like spot on. It's amazing.
Nice.
So I
Very nice.
used the aftermarket decals for this one called Éxito. Éxito
Éxito, yeah.
decals. Yep. I pronounce it Spanish. It means success. It means success. Éxito. Anyways,
Very nice.
so yeah, are we able to touch the filtering subject?
Why don't we say filtering after? I think we've
Okay.
got quite a few.
Yeah,
Okay.
let's
Yeah.
turn through.
Can I show you? So
Yeah.
so this is
Oh, nice.
that's the bottom side.
Beauty.
What kind of paints did you use, Esteban? What brand?
I used AK and Model Master.
Nice.
But there's one thing I noticed from AK. If you notice on the RLM gray band
Yeah.
at the bottom,
Yeah.
right on the edge of that band, there's a chip. I've noticed that's what happens with those paints when you mask off areas, even after putting future.
Really?
It tends-
What did you thin it with? What did you thin the AK paint with?
With Mr. Color Thinner.
Huh. Interesting.
Yeah. So I've noticed that even if you like you don't want to slap it on, right? You just want to lightly
Yeah.
place it on the surface. I've noticed that even doing that, it still chips off.
Where's the chip? Esteban, show us with your cursor.
Right there. You see it?
That. Yeah,
Right
yeah.
there.
Yeah, I can see it. Yeah.
You
Yeah.
really have to look for it.
Like even after putting future, that happens.
Really?
It's just a small thing. I like.
Did you what primer did you use on the model? What did you put a primer on it? Primer coat?
Yeah, I primed it with the RLM gray.
Huh.
To get this kind of like a snowy RLM white effect.
Right. But did you use a model primer like Tamiya spray primer or
Surfacer.
Mr. Surfacer?
No.
That might help.
That might help, eh? Okay.
Yeah.
Final res is good.
Can I show you, sorry, briefly, one of my finished products?
Yeah.
So this is my finish. This is one of Hartman's black tulip.
Nice.
Yeah. This is the Edward.
Beauty.
Beauty.
Yeah, very nice.
That's
You'll fit in well with the club there, Esteban.
Thank you very much. Wow.
Yeah, well done.
Yeah, very nice.
All
All
right.
right, you wanted to pass the hosting duties back to me, and I'll go through everybody else's.
Eric, right?
That's me.
Okay. Oh, thank you very much.
Not at all.
So I
Good
will.
Nice
I
work.
will move people along rather rapidly today. Let's see, it's screen 3 that I'm sharing. All right, everybody can see that.
Yep.
All right. Up first is Amanda. Give us a few words about what you sent me today.
Dragons, Valentine. It's from somebody else before them. It's not a bad kit, not a great kit. I hear Tamiya's is better. I did it in the 10th Panzer Division, Africa Corps. Jerry cans, I added that. The decals came from a decal sheet from Tamiya, the buffalo on the side of the turret.
Yeah.
Nice.
Is that 35th scale?
Yeah.
Yeah, that's what I thought. Yeah, sorry.
Up next.
4 Tamiya Famos. First one's an Africa Corps, it's just a regular Famo. Next one is a 9-1 with a 6-ton crane. The next one to that is a 9-2 with a 10-ton crane. And the last one is a pre-war prototype. They only built one, trying out the bench seats. They decided not to build more than just one.
Very nice.
Cool.
Yeah.
It's a lot of work.
This is the bench seat one towing a 21 centimeter mortar. It's a trumpeter kit. I looked it over. And it looks like they copied the one out in Shiloh,
Ah,
because the base plate that it sits on the ground, on one side there's 2 rollers, and on the other side there's 2 rollers. On one side, one is down, on the other side, one is up. And that's the way they modeled it in the kit. It was really weird, and I looked over my photos from the gun in Shiloh, and I was like, what?
There's a good overall shot. All right.
very nice.
Thank you. Up next, Andrew, AJ. It's for
Oh,
fun.
yeah. Here we go. This is part of 1/144 scale Zvezda 737-800 Max, Air Canada colors. So I built one last summer, but the decals were lousy, and I ended up pitching it in the bin. And then, yeah. And this is another one I'm doing too, another Zvezda kit. And this is a C40. That's the Air Force 737-700. What I did do, there's the 800 series. What I did do was I cast a new resin windshield, because I'm using a decal for it. And because it's funny, the plastic is fairly hard, but the clear part is almost like vinyl. It's really weird. So I just cast some new resin parts to put on it, fill it in, and then we'll put the decal on. I think I got a picture there, Eric, of the decal.
This one?
Yeah, there it is there. They're making these decals now, and they have window shades on them, people inside, and then the flight deck, for the cockpit windows, you can see the flight crew sort of, or see light through it. And
that's
a little
great.
more effective than that scale, like as opposed to just putting a gray decal in.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
So
What scale is that, Al? What scale is that?
1/144th.
Thank you.
And you're saying, AJ, that it works, eh? Those decals work?
Yeah, they're nice. Yeah, they come from Germany. Authentic airliners, yeah. It's just something different. Like, it's perspective. Like, usually people were using gray windows in that small scale, which is fine from far, but then you look at it closer, it just adds a little more depth to it. It's just a different idea.
Yeah, that looks really nice. Are you also building it with the MCAS fix on it?
With the what? Sorry, John?
The MCAS fix?
Yeah. All checked out, ready to go.
That's good.
Yeah.
Safe to bring.
This is the cockpit for, I'm working on a Tamiya 48 scale Spitfire. And this is the cockpit for it.
Nice.
And it's almost, basically, you'll see from the other photos, it's almost ready to go together, really. Like that's
What are the seatbelts from?
That's from the kit. Those are photo etched.
You're kidding.
Yeah,
Those look
photo
fabulous.
etched, bare metal, and then I primed them, painted them, and weathered them a little bit.
Okay, those look fabulous.
Yeah,
Thanks. The decals on the left here, fun decals. That's the aircraft I'm doing at Sailor Milan's
Oh, cool.
aircraft.
That's neat.
Yeah, and it's a beautiful kit. Just the technology in this thing is just the way they've engineered it, and that typical Tamiya.
Yeah.
Is that different from the first Spitfire they produced?
Yes,
Totally
there's a
different.
lot more interior details in the cockpit, and then the fit, I would say, and the way it's designed is just like golden. Like I don't think you need any filler on it. And if you look at the lower picture next to the wing, there's a landing gear there. It's all one piece. There it is there, yeah. And it drops into there to give you the perfect cant on the gear.
Yeah.
Nice.
When you put it together, after you paint it, you just put this thing in, and there's 2 plates that go over top of it to cover it.
That is smart.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Is this finally a kit?
You can't beat Tamiya for that.
So you
really.
can't screw up the landing gear.
Yeah. You're
Watch-
bang on
watch
with
me.
dehedral and angles.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
I'll find a way to screw it. I'll give me a chance.
Yeah, same here.
John, you won't.
We're all
Is this a new kit?
What's that?
Is this a new kit?
That's the newest Tamiya. Yeah,
Okay.
the Spitfire. Yeah, that's the new one. Yeah. Well, it came out I think last year. I think or yeah.
Very cool. Thanks.
Great. Up next,
Well done.
we have Chuck.
Okay,
That's-
so
There he is. Yeah. Do these in order.
yeah, I wanted to do something in Afghanistan, but I didn't want to do something that everyone else is doing. So I thought I'd do a Russian tanks in Afghanistan in the mid 1980s. So this is a picture of one. And this is almost the one I'm going to be finishing. I'm going to use this camouflage. Except the one that I'm doing has added armor on the hull as well as the turret. You want to go to the next picture? You can see this one's obviously a derelict, but you can see the added armor on the hull. Luckily, Trumpeter makes one of these kits, so it didn't require very much modification. Next. Oh, the one thing, go back to that picture. One thing to remember is look at the end of the barrel and see how big the opening is, because I'm going to come back to that later. And this shows the side skirts, which are actually rubber. So the side skirts that are in the kit are obviously molded in plastic, and I still need to separate them out and thin them out and make them look more rubbery. Next.
Is this a T55 or what is this?
So far, it's a Trumpeter kit. It's, I guess, mostly out of the box, but I made a few modifications.
No, Chuck, what, for those of us who aren't familiar with Soviet armor of that era, is this a T55? What is this?
T62.
T62, okay, thanks.
Yeah. Okay, next. Okay, so this is an overall shot. I don't have the front road wheels on because actually the whole suspension comes off, so I can paint it and then I'll stick it back on.
And how did it go together, Chuck? Is it a good kit?
It's okay. It's about a 15-year-old kit.
Yeah.
Or the base kit is about 15 years old. I think this version they released about 10 years ago. I mean, it's typical Trumpeter. It goes together pretty well. It's fairly simple. But there's not a lot of finesse. And so it takes a little bit of work. There's a little bit of filling here and there just to get it to be good. Okay, next. Okay, and that's the other side next. And then we'll get into some details. So one of the things is that the headlight guard that comes in the Trumpeter kit is really thick. And so I decided to make my own. And what I did was I used the headlight guard from the kit and made a little form out of plastic. And then I took wire, 24 gauge, I think it was 24 gauge wire, and bent it around. That's the silver part. And then glued those on, and then just used 20 thou plastic in between. Okay, next.
Nice.
This is one of the things on T55s and T62s that up until Mini Art, none of the manufacturers provided is the piping for the external fuel tanks. And so it's something that has to be done manually, or you have to add it or else ignore it. Okay, next. So I added it. These are the rear fuel tanks, and then way over on the right side is the front fuel tank. If I was to do this again, this is 25 thou rod. I'd probably use 20 thou rod just to make it a little bit thinner. Next. Okay. The kit comes with 2 big fuel drums on the back and brackets for those, but I couldn't find any picture of a T62 anywhere in Afghanistan with those fuel drums. But you can see here that there's the mounts for the fuel drums right on the back. So if you go next, I just made 4 mounts myself and stuck them on. Made out of plastic and drilled. Okay, next. The engine deck, the back grill needs a framework on top, and so that's just made out of 30 thou or 10 by 30 strip plastic on top of the photo etch. And then there's the turret. And the turret, for the most part, is fairly accurate. There's a couple of things, and actually, by the time I got to the turret, I was getting kind of lazy, and so I didn't do everything that I could have. but you can see it's fairly well detailed the way it is. The instructions, the order of the instructions, just like a lot of kits, are not great. It's always a good idea to look at it and see where there could be pitfalls. And one of the main pitfalls is the added armor on the front has, each piece has 2 brackets. And the instructions say attach the brackets to the hull and then put the armor on. And of course, if you do that, things aren't going to line up. And so I put the brackets onto the added armor and then put the whole thing onto the hull. Okay, next. And then it comes with an anti-aircraft machine gun, which is actually pretty well detailed. It's a little finicky to put together. It's, I think that's 10 or 12 parts that go into that machine gun. But once you get it all together, I think it looks pretty good. None of the machine gun, like the coax machine gun or this machine gun, are drilled out. So obviously you got to do that. Next. And then this is the back, and it comes with these brackets, which is actually pretty nice, because otherwise I would have had to make some. Next. And this is something that I was thinking of doing, but I've decided I'm not going to. But before the Americans started using slat armor in Afghanistan, 20 years earlier, the Russians were already using it. Okay,
Are those Afghani troops?
Yep.
Nope.
Oh, no, they're well, I don't know if they're Afghani or if they're Russian.
No, the Russians by their hats. The
Okay, I guess I didn't do a picture, but one of the problems with the kit comes with the metal barrel, which is nice.
Yep.
But the opening at the end of the metal barrel is equivalent to about 90 millimeters, but the gun is a 115 millimeter gun. So it's off by scale 25 millimeters. The outside diameter is actually right. And so I actually had to drill out a metal barrel to get the right hole. That's why I said, yeah, this picture. If you look at the metal barrel when it comes in the kit, you can see that the edge around here is a lot thicker because the interior.
How did you drill out the barrel? What did you use, Chuck?
Drill bit and a Dremel.
Oh, manually with your hand is what I meant, right?
No, I used the Dremel on slow speed.
Oh, I'm sorry. I missed that. Sorry. Okay.
I would have thought that you would have chucked it into a lathe and then use a boring tool.
That's what I was
If I
getting
had
at.
a lathe and a boring tool, that's exactly what I would have done.
Right.
Do you notice how
Jonathan?
the
It's
pun
okay. I
there,
didn't
eh?
drill very far because, I mean, I may have drilled about 5 millimeters into the barrel, and that's
Beautiful, beautiful.
I like your unintended pun there, chucked.
Most of us got it.
We chucked it.
Right, Jonathan?
So that's it. Oh, and in case you're wondering what happened to the Stug that I showed last month, it's all finished, but I discovered that I didn't have any Panzer Gray. And so I'm waiting until I can actually go into a hobby shop again to get some.
Good stuff.
When is that going to happen?
Yeah. All right. I'll just briefly go through my updates to the Panther since last time you saw it. I started working on the marking. As I mentioned, I'm painting all the primary markings on this one. So that's kept me busy most of the past month. This is just a kind of an in progress. This is what I do. The R tool, biscuit material, cut out on a silhouette and then put on here with ample masking. If I don't overdo it, I will always get overspray somewhere. So that was after the upper wings.
Looks nice.
Did it again.
Oh, nice.
Obviously, I did it in phases. Then I did the sides of the fuselage, and that's how those turned out. And then finally, I came back in.
Sweet.
Oh. So,
Yeah, it's beautiful.
this is where it sits today. I gloss coated it, added the 3 decals on it that I actually did keep from the kit, and then I put a filter on it. It's a medium-y gray. I don't want it to come out too stark against the dark airframe. It doesn't come out well in the photos, but in real life, it's there. It's very subtle, but it's there. These were in service for such a short period of time that you didn't get a chance to get it anyways. So keeping it light on this one. So yeah, next step will be to do a final coat on. I got to do all the weapons and stuff still. So maybe by next month it'll be done.
Very nice.
Very nice.
Love it.
Well done. Well done, Eric.
Yeah.
Beautiful.
And Garvin, you had a couple of photos here to show of your Duesenberg model.
Yeah, nothing very much to say about it. You can hear me, right, guys?
Yep.
Yeah, yeah.
Basically, well, this is a pet project of mine because it's being done for a friend of mine. So by the time we get back together, the group gets back together, it'll probably be out of my shop and into my friend's hands.
There it is in progress, I guess. It's one of these.
Yeah, it's in half progress right now. As you can see, I've only done the two front wheels, and then I still need to do the back wheels as well as put doors and sides on.
Very good. All right.
Cool.
Look forward to updates on that one. Grant sent in pictures of a couple ships he's working on or worked on. Finished.
Okay.
Nice.
This is the Hasegawa 1/700 scale Hakiwa Maru as a hospital ship. I got it from Carefree Hobbies, and amazingly, it's a kit that nothing was missing in it. Usually I find Carefree Hobbies always get something missing in the kit. I don't know why. But
He buys collections.
Anyhow, this is built out of the box except for the railings. Good little kit, nice fit. Something a little different. I guess if I was really going to get keen, I'd replace all the booms and masts with wire. And say something a little different.
Hey Grant,
Okay.
you can email me offline. I had the pleasure of visiting the ship in Yokohama.
Really?
And I took tons of pictures. I didn't even know she was docked there. I said that ship looks like a World War II. Anyways, it's quite popular tourist destination in Yokohama now.
Yeah, the Hasegawa was released as a couple versions of it. One
Yeah.
is the hospital ship, one is the
It's the only one
liner.
that survived the war, the class.
Yeah.
Oh.
Let's say the booms and like the boat davits are a little ham-fisted, but it's just
looks like a fun build.
Beautiful.
Very nice. And next.
This is the IBG 1/700 scale kit of HMS Glowworm. And it went together pretty well, except I managed to screw the pooch rather nicely on the mast. But again, this is purely out of the box, including the railings. And the railings were extremely thin photo etch. The rest of the kit went together fairly well. But again, I built it so I could enter the out of the box category. But really, I should have replaced those masts because they're like telephone poles. They're really ham-fisted. But it went together well.
Neat subject.
Excellent work.
Very nice.
Harvey, you're up next.
Yeah, I'll be quick. So I go from the opposite of scratch building to doing a Tamiya kit. And as Andy mentioned about the Spitfire, this is the 1/72nd Tamiya Key 61 Tony. What a joy to build. The only thing I want to note here is I'm going through a weathering exercise on this because this particular aircraft was a kamikaze version that was supposed to serve in night operations from Okinawa. And pictures show that the scheme was highly stressed. And you can see the anti-glare. There's a lot of hairspray on that front panel. And I just used the Tresemme right out of the can, 1 or 2 coats right out of the can, and just stress the paint out of it. Next slide. One thing to note is the underside is all clad. And one thing to mention, if you guys are using all clad, try to use the colors that are, you can tell there's differences because some of their colors are so subtle, you'll lose it in the weathering. So you have to choose like the white aluminum, dark aluminum, and keep things very abrupt. Otherwise, you'll lose it in the weathering process. Next slide. Now, this is a close-up, the green camouflage there. That's applied using Tamiya NATO green. Now, here's the thing. I wanted it not to look like it was airbrushed, but to look like it's scuffed, which is what the pictures show of this aircraft. So I experimented on the weekend, and it seemed to work. If you want this effect, thin the paint, thin Tamiya paint with Windex, okay? You're not using any other thinner but Windex. Thin it about 50-50 with Windex. Apply the paint with an airbrush like you would with any other paint, except that you're spraying 50-50 Tamiya paint with Windex. Once it gets on there, let it dry for, you know, maybe 2 hours, and then take the lightest sandpaper you can get, dip that in Windex, and start scrubbing away. And this is the effect it gives you. It's not an airbrush effect, it's a scuffed effect. Next slide.
Very nice.
Harvey,
Yeah.
did you seal the undercoat or the previous coat to protect against the Windex?
Yes, you do. And in this case, I sealed it because the material that you're applying is Windex and it's water-based more, or with a bit of ammonia. I sealed it with Mr. Colored, the Gunzi gloss lacquer, right? So then I know that it's not going to harm the all-clad. And if you guys want to seal all-clad, you can use the Gunzi stuff, light layers, and it doesn't take away from the metallic effect. The challenge I'm going to have on this aircraft, though, next slide, Eric, is you see that's what it's going to look like. And the camouflage goes over this scrubbed green, and it's basically a whole bunch of lines. And this photo is actually wrong. The profile's wrong. Those lines in the photo are black. They went over that topside camo green with black camouflage in squiggly lines. And the only way, I'm doing it now, the only way to do this is with a custom micron, because you're working in 72nd scale. And I'm using a custom micron on it right now. But you'll see that the model will have actually changed because those black thin lines will be covering the top green. It's going to be a very unusual camouflage. So that's going to be a challenge. But try the Windex. It gives a nice scrub effect. You can probably use it on armor as well. That's all I got.
Very nice.
Thanks.
Good.
Beautiful.
Jonathan, you sent in a submarine or two here.
Yeah.
Whiskey on the rocks.
It's a Soviet whiskey class on the rocks.
Oh, nice.
It's a famous one.
Grown.
The Swedes call it the U-137, but it's actually the Soviet S-363 that was ran aground in October 1981, 10 miles short of Sweden's major naval base. And they got the skipper out, and one of the navigators fled that they'd had all sorts of troubles, this, that, and the other. But it was on a recon mission. They had 2 sets of navigation going on, and it was rather famous. All the bent holes are drilled out, filed out. Some of them have photo etch in them. And the hardest thing to make were the windows. The windows on the conning tower were a turned piece of plastic, polished for the inside hole. Then the outside diameter was turned and polished, and then it was taken off the lathe with a parting tool that took me an hour to make, just grinding it to keep it as thin as I could. So I couldn't resist doing that. They nicknamed it the Swedish Cosmolovs, which was always kind of like saying the Swedish Boy Scouts.
Yeah.
But it was a micrometer kit, but the name block is a copy of Vesna's stuff. So they all match. The ice cubes are acrylic, squared, and then polished off.
Nice.
And she's a little over-weathered for my liking, but that's another story.
Very nice.
That's awesome. Well done. Well done, John.
Very nice.
This is a iron shipwright. Hang on a second. Sorry, Blue Water Navy kit, which had atrocious photo etch for all the control surfaces, which I added some styrene and then rescribed and shaped and sanded and filed until I got it. There's actually the control control arms are on both the rudder and the dive plane. The forward dive planes actually go into the casing, and one fits above the other. They're not symmetrical deliberately. Brilliant idea. But this vessel was on, it was originally the S-21 American Navy, and the US Navy put it on Lend-Lease so the RN could have it. And then the RN allocated it to Canada in 1940, late 42 to early 44, so that we could do anti-submarine training. On the back, and it's really funny because when I took this photo, the back line for somehow looks like it's bent up, and it was, but it's back to normal now. They had a loop antenna, which are all those little dots on the lines, and the rigging took quite a while. But it was camouflaged in a scheme that the Brits used, and I just thought the camo looked so good. It didn't get to weather too much because as soon as they got it, they took it aside, cleaned it up, painted it, and then put it out into action. So it wasn't, I didn't want to overdo it. And
a unique subject.
Yeah, the decals, that center 5 is actually 8 pieces.
What?
Because it broke up on the ladder.
Oh.
So it was quite the pain in the you-know-what. So
is this 350th scale?
Yeah, it's 350. So you're looking at it nearly full size.
Nice.
Awesome.
So how
You
long
took
is
an 8
that?
to make a 5.
Yeah.
Good for you, John.
What is that, like 6-7 inches long?
Yeah.
If anybody has that kit, I'm looking for it too.
Yeah. Sorry, Art.
No, not at all.
Oops.
All right. Anybody else?
We had Glenn here.
Glenn, yes, your auto gyro.
His load here. Yeah, his auto gyro.
Holy
Last time we made it all the way up to about.
Holy smokes.
That was fun.
We're going to take us.
That was fun, Glenn. That's awesome.
Yeah, this is a personal milestone because this is the first manned aircraft model I have completed in my adult life.
Okay, we're giving you a hand.
Thank you.
Go back to submarines.
I don't usually do cockpits. Oh, thank you, John. Appreciate that. You just don't want the competition.
Yeah, I'm sure Harvey doesn't want it either. He's just being
No,
polite.
no, Glenn, you're right up there, buddy.
So I had a good chance to, the cockpit is fairly simple, very basic photo etch seat belts that turned out nicely. I tried a few filters and weathering things on the cockpit floor and on the sidewalls. Just trying by God, and turned out rather well.
Good job on the pictures, by the way.
Yeah. Thank you. My iPhone thanks you.
All right.
Hey,
Would you recommend the kit?
Glenn, that cockpit wall there is really distressed nicely. How did you do that?
Yeah.
Which one? The one below there?
The one, yeah, right there. Where you're,
the one you're pointing there now, yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, there's a lot of glare there. It looks really silver, but the photo right down below it, showing that one there, that's better color representation. So that was just a couple of different filters and splattering things, you know, flicking paintbrush off the end of a toothpick, and just various washes, a little bit of dry brushing, pin washes, and then feathering it all in. I just tried anything and everything that I thought, oh, let's give it a try. It's a test bed, and it worked out.
Yeah, you know, Glenn, you're a superb armor modeler, and you know it's always good to see some of those techniques moved into aircraft, and it works here.
Yeah, like things I wouldn't normally try on other types of things. I thought, oh, what the hell? I'm here. I got oil paints. Let's give it a shot, and it just happened to work out.
It's great. It's great.
Beautiful.
So I gave up at the out-of-box thing with the engine, and then I thought, well, there's a couple of missing things, details on the steerable tail wheel. So added a few little linkages there and canted it off to the side, just, you know, for visual interest. And when I was building the rear tail planes, everything was looking wonderful. Got the angles on the ends fine. And by the time that I got to the painting and the masking and stuff like that, I discovered, well, the masking lines don't match up to the front leading edge. And I had a panic attack thinking, oh God, I was so worried about the ends of the things lining up that I forgot about the fronts. and nothing lined up, and I was prepared to launch it into the bin. And then a little bit of looking online, realized, oh, the tail planes are not symmetrical. One is flipped upside down.
Huh. Wow.
Yeah. So a panic attack averted. So the assembly went rather well. The cockpit was one piece. It just fit into the inside of the fuselage. Everything went well. The landing gear is an absolute work of art. It's 3 pieces, and the molding on it is just utterly fabulous. Trying to keep things, all lined up and level and aligned and everything was the biggest challenge. But after priming it, I went to my tried and true AK real color paints, and I thought, oh, okay, here's the first color, yellow. I'm either going to badly screw it up or it's going to turn out marvelous. And lucky it turned out the latter, because I heard yellow is notoriously difficult to try and spray. But it went on very, very well.
Well.
And then this was a trainer I decided to do just because the colors look really cool. So the top side has a hard demarcation. Painted that with RAF brown and greens. And then I knew this thing was fabric and metal, so I put on a couple of different clear coats, some satin and some flat. And then I started doing washes and filters, just for, one area is going to stain, one area is going to chip.
Here's some good examples down here.
Wow,
Yeah.
look at that, eh? Nice.
Yeah, so all the fabric covered stuff was done in a flat coat, and then I started staining it with oils, and it just took on the colors beautifully. And you could see one before the weathering and after the weathering, just a little tint of orange in with the yellow, a little bit of chipping on the metal parts using a sponge, and yeah, just various colored washes. Down at the bottom, you can see the underside, a lot of chipping effects that are on the metal parts, more staining and stuff that's on the fabric stuff.
Yeah, that's beautiful.
Did your oils go on a gloss base or a flat base?
Sorry, say again?
Did your oil washes go on a flat base or a gloss base?
They went on a flat base.
Oh.
So in the middle of the, you can see the egress pattern, or the egress area where the cockpit, or it has the door that slides down.
Yep.
So that area was all metal, and then you had right behind that you could see the hard lines where the ribbing starts, and that was all fabric. So metal areas got the satin finish on it. The fabric areas got the flat finish on it.
Yeah.
And then I started chipping on the metal and just filtering on the fabric covered stuff, because it wouldn't chip.
Yeah, I know, John, why you asked that, because you'll get a different effect with oils on a matte versus gloss finish. On gloss,
Yeah, it was radically different, and I used the AK 3rd generation satin and the matte clears.
Yeah,
and it was just fabulous. The flat is very, very nice.
Nice.
Harvey,
yeah.
And the best part I like is the front cowling, the engine cowling turned out just marvelously.
Yeah, that's
There's
great.
a lot of
beautiful.
A lot of
That's great.
and splatters.
it's beautiful. If you're
Yeah.
doing oils on something glossy, the
Yeah.
oils don't have anything to stick to.
Exactly.
That's right.
Right.
They become a wash.
Yeah.
Yep.
And then
Yeah, the
you're
only thing
praying, you're praying that it's actually going to get into a seam or something and stay there.
Yeah, but then it
versus
depends on the
matte
fact.
being-
Exactly.
And Glenn, you've achieved it here on a flat surface because it kind of like spreads it out. It doesn't become a wash, which is what you want here, right?
Bingo.
Yeah.
I love the
Bingo. Yeah, you
cowling.
can see on the cowling, the part where it looks like it's all stained and there's a lot of fuel stains and stuff. That's a satin finish on there, and I just flicked paint onto that, and it was mostly thinner, so it evaporated and left a little bit of color.
That's great.
But if I had tried to apply it with a as a pin wash, it would just fall right off.
Yeah.
Great effect. Great
Yeah.
effect.
By the way, Glenn, you're no longer welcome on this IPMS group, okay? Just saying.
So how is this any different than last week?
Why do you think?
I was so happy with the results for that mini art kit. I thought, oh, I got another 35th scale mini art kit, and it's another weird subject. So I thought, oh, let's give this a try and hope that it has the same quality.
Was this was this your website or something?
Yeah.
Oh, what is the website?
I'll put it in the chat.
Okay.
That's
I
great.
have a collection
That's
of everything that I build.
Beautiful.
Yeah, well done.
So this is the one that I'm working on right now, and I threw out the out of box manual, and I thought, might as well put in a little bit of detail, and a little bit of detail turned into a lot of detail. So this is what happened when
that's
looking for
surprising how.
photographs. Yeah, no kidding.
That's
But
great.
it turns out the more you look for pictures, the more work it ends up being for you. But that's okay.
Yeah, that's
kudos to Mini Art for doing subjects like this, I think.
Tell me about it. They got 4 of these synchrocopters, 4 different variants of the same one, and they're absolutely stunning.
Drill Bit City. The What If collection.
No, these actually worked.
Oh, these are true ones.
Oh,
okay.
yeah.
Yeah,
they got, I found a guy who did a 1/18 scale 3D version, and he gave me links to training pictures of when this thing was actually flying, and it's just marvelous to look at this thing.
Hey, Glenn, did you get those, are those from Drill Bit City, or where did you get the bits?
I think it was Drill Bits Unlimited. I got them about
Okay.
5 or 6 years ago. And you go through them a lot because any side pressure and snap, and they're gone, and you hope you don't bury it inside a model part.
Yeah.
That's great.
All right.
Yeah, that's where we are at the engine, and then trying to fit it into the origami framework is going to be fun.
Hey, Glenn, are you familiar with de-spruing nippers, tweezers?
Like the D-Sipe ones or whatever they're called?
No. They're a type of tweezer that's used to do for cutting sprues. I will.
Yes. Yeah, I got a pair. I don't.
Okay,
use them.
good. And I've got several, but
Is that the display ones?
No. These
No, they're actually they clip like this.
They're used by jewelers. They were
Yeah.
originally developed in the jewelry trade,
Oh,
and what
okay.
they are is like a set of tweezers, but they've got little blades on the end of them, and you can
Yeah.
really get in.
I have a set. I don't use them. I prefer to use a razor saw.
Yeah, like a JLC saw.
Yeah.
Beautiful
Yeah, so
work.
it's
Beautiful.
funny when you look at the instructions and everything looks so big, and it's going to be the size of your head, and no, this is the size of the parts.
Wow.
I hate them for that, but I kind of love them for that too.
Isn't one of these
Mini
things
art, yeah.
featured in Where Eagles Dare? Right at the beginning, someone comes in with a helicopter or a helicopter-like vehicle.
Yeah.
One of my all-time favorite movies.
Yeah.
I love Where Eagles Dare. Richard
I
Burton.
don't know.
is
Yeah.
Ruthless.
They flew these things off of ships to scan for U-boats that were in the area, and it always nailed them time after time.
Oh, that 1/18th scale. That guy did that. He 3D modeled it, if I recall correctly.
And that guy has been a wealth of information. I ask him a simple question, and he will give me pages and pages of answers and links, and God love him. He's fantastic.
I love that 3D rendering. Who did that?
Don't know. My model will never, ever end up like that, though.
That is just beautiful.
We'll send it over to Anthony. He'll just print one up for us.
Yeah. There you go.
There you go.
Well done, Glenn.
Sure, why not?
Oh, thank you.
Glenn. All right, that was everything I had.
Very nice.
Great.
What time is it?
On.
Now, it's
We have
9:30.
it's 9:30,
guys.
yeah.
It's
But
9:30. You guys want to save the filter conversation next time? What do you guys want? What do you, we can continue, or it is getting a bit late here. It's entirely up to you guys.
Hey Harvey, remember you did at Hornet Hobbies, you did a weathering seminar that pin washes and filters and all that. I still got to paste it on my board here, but
Okay.
you don't have that file anymore, do you?
I probably don't.
I'll
I can
scan
look for it.
I'll scan
But
it and send it to you.
Esteban, unmic yourself. I think you had your hand up.